Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how to paint your guitar with duplicolor spray cans. So I'm going to be doing a pearl red paint job today. I get a lot of questions about painting with duplicolor, and I figured it was time to make a tutorial on it. So let's get started. Alright, first things first here. Chances are your guitar has a finish on it. Even if it doesn't, you need to sand it. But particularly if it has a paint job on it already, you're going to need to sand it so that that new paint can stick. And even more particularly if it's gloss. Paint doesn't stick properly to a gloss finish generally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some 320 grit. You need to sand pretty much the entire surface and make sure that that gloss is gone. Or if it's a different kind of paint job, just make sure that it's scuffed up enough so that the new paint will be able to grip onto that, those scuff marks. Use a sanding block for any of the flat areas if you can. It helps so that you don't leave ridges and stuff. If you can't use a sanding block, just try to avoid using your fingers. I know it's easy to push with your fingers, but try and use your palm. Your palm will do a better job. So it's pretty straightforward. We just want to sand. This thing's got probably 5 paint jobs layered on it right now because this is my test paint job guitar, but that's not really the point. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I've sanded the surface fairly evenly across the face. Now this can be a bit time consuming if you're trying to take the finish all the way off, particularly if you're doing it by hand like this and you don't have a power sander or you're not using a heat gun. Just bear in mind that you don't necessarily have to take the finish all the way off. Really, you just need to scuff it up enough for the new paint to stick. So don't feel like you have to do that. You'll notice the back of my guitar is a different color. Like I said, it's my test one. Usually I just paint the front for test videos, but since we're talking about how to do a full paint job today, I'm going to do the whole thing. There is some junk on here. Wow. So if this guitar were in normal condition, aka had a factory paint job or even a properly done full paint job on it, that'd be it. I'd be pretty much done by now. Thing is, mine has some previous masking marks and stuff, so it needs a little bit more sanding than average. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and we'll be back for the next step. Alright, so once that surface is all scuffed up, now it's time to clean it so that we can start throwing on our primer. Ideally, you'll use wax and grease remover for this, but if you don't have it, lighter fluid works, even Windex. That's what I'm going to use because I assume a lot of you don't have wax and grease remover kicking around. You'll notice that I'm using a spray stand here. I just kind of made it myself. You don't necessarily need one. You can hang your guitar using a bent coat hanger or some wire or something like that, or even spray it one side at a time. If you are interested in making something along these lines, I do have a video from ages ago on my channel about a custom-made spray stand for guitars. There's really no magic to this part. You're just taking all of the dust and grease and everything off there. I've already cleaned it once part way through the sanding job, but I'm sure you'll notice when I show you this cloth, and by cloth I mean paper towel, that it is still quite dirty. So it is an important step to make sure you clean it, or you'll end up with problems with your paint not sticking properly, problems with contamination, problems with dust in your finish so it won't be smooth. Just problems. See what I mean? That does not belong in your paint job. So I've got a can of duplicolor's filler primer here. Gonna make sure that I shake it up real well. This stuff says 10 minutes between coats, which is pretty standard for a solvent-based paint, as you've probably heard me say before. It also says 30 minutes before painting over it or sanding it. Now, I'd be hesitant, if I were you, to go ahead and sand this after 30 minutes. I like to give it a little bit longer than that, but you know, for the sake of argument, I'm gonna sand it after 30 minutes for this video just to show that you can, in fact, do that, but you do need to be careful, particularly if you're dealing with a space where it's not particularly warm. It's actually quite hot in here. You might even be able to see me sweating, so it probably will dry just fine in that amount of time. If it's not so warm where you're spraying, you're gonna wanna give it longer, maybe even up to a day. I'm going to throw my mask on for this because this stuff smells like instant cancer, and then you can watch me spray the first coat. I will be doing 2 coats 10 minutes apart. the second one's gonna be the exact same. So I'm just gonna spray the first one on camera, and then we'll come back for the next part. From a technique standpoint here, you want to make sure that you're overlapping your paint strokes by about 50%. So you'll notice when you spray, you cover a certain area, you want to respray half of that area with your next pass. All right, you also want to go off the edges of the instrument in both directions so that you don't end up with a buildup at the ends where you turn around. And luckily the duplicolor nozzle has a bit of a fan pattern, so it does make it easier to get that spray. It's not a great fan cap, but it does work. So 50% overlap. I like to do the edges first so that when I go to do the faces after, I cover any overspray from the edges. I'd rather have the faces smooth and have to worry about the edges than vice versa. And again, off the edges of the piece when you turn around. Now that I've got my 2 coats of filler primer on there and it's been drying for about half an hour in this relatively warm environment, I'm gonna go ahead and take some 400 grit sandpaper and just scuff it down again, make sure that it's abraded so the new paint will stick, and make sure that it's flat. Sometimes you get rough areas. I don't have any rough areas on this one, but it doesn't hurt anyway to just go ahead and scuff it back lightly. Not in a very good position to do that right there. Scuff it back lightly and make sure that that surface is nice and smooth. All right, it doesn't take much. You just want to lightly scuff it up, and then you probably guessed the next step, clean it again. Anytime you sand the guitar, you're going to want to clean it again, make sure you get all that dust off of there. Anytime you're really touching it, honestly, ideally you would clean it after that. Make sure you get your fingerprints and stuff off of there. No matter how clean you are, chances are there's some grease on your hands. People are just greasy, we're gross. So clean that off of your guitar before you go to spray it again. Shouldn't take long, and this Windex or waxing grease remover, stuff like that, tends to evaporate very quickly, faster than water. So if you wipe it on, wipe it off, you should be ready to spray again in a matter of mere moments. So next up, we're going to be applying our Pearl Red. I have here the duplicolor Perfect Match Red Pearl, and again, same system. 10 minutes between coats, as is usually the case with this solvent-based style paint, and then 30 minutes before applying the clear. So we're going to try and get this done in 2 coats as well. If you're spraying a little lighter, you might need 3. It's not a big deal, but ideally 2 coats of something like this should be sufficient. You just need to look at it and make sure you're getting full coverage. Your first coat might not give full coverage, but the spray style is going to be the same. We're going to do that 50% overlap. We're going to go off the edges, and 2 coats with flow should get it done. My 2 coats are now done, 10 minutes apart. You saw the first one, the second one was put on exactly the same, just got a little bit better coverage and more opacity from that second one, of course. 2 is perfectly sufficient. Again, if you're putting them on lighter than that, you might need 3. Now I get to wait half an hour and go ahead and spray my clear coat. Based on this paint system, the clear coat should go on fine after half an hour. I shouldn't have to sand again. With metallics like this, pearlescent paints, you really want to avoid situations where you have to sand that. Otherwise, it's probably best to put on another light dust coat so that you get those metallics to lay out evenly. Now, there are a couple things I want to show you here. First of all, this color, because it's actually really nice. And second, what happens when you don't pay enough attention while you're sanding or you don't do a good enough job. I got lazy because this is just a demo, and honestly, as soon as this is done, I'm gonna let it dry and I'm gonna strip it back again and do another paint job on it. If you're starting with a brand new guitar or a guitar that has a nice even finish on it, simply scuffing it like I told you is gonna be sufficient. However, if you're starting with a guitar that you've already played with, like this one, for example, had a bunch of crazy masking patterns and stuff from doing, tape work, from doing the dish soap trick and whatnot, and I didn't sand it flat properly. And you're gonna notice in here that I've got some crazy lines going on, and I'm getting some reacting, because the last type of paint that I sprayed this with was either acrylic or enamel, I can't really remember, and now I'm spraying it with these duplicolor paints, which are lacquer based if I'm not mistaken. So, one, if you spray lacquer over enamel, you're gonna have reaction issues. This paint has been drying a long time, not the lacquer, but the enamel, which is why they're fairly minimal. But this paint job is not gonna have the durability that it should because I did that. So make sure that you're not spraying lacquer over enamel unless it's been drying for an insanely long time. You wanna make sure that every bit of solvent is out of there. And also make sure you sand it properly so you don't get this weird patterning. You can probably see that ever so faintly. That is going to show up in my clear coat. Even if I put my clear coat on beautifully, sand it and polish it and everything, you'll be able to see that underneath. So keep that in mind. For one, you can use this method if you want to get like a ghost pattern in there, but if you're looking for a nice even factory finish, make sure you've sanded it perfectly flat before you even throw on your primer. At this point, we've done all our prep work and everything. We've got our color on there. We've talked about the problems with my particular paint job, so sorry about that, but hopefully you can take it as a learning point. Now it's time to move on to the clear. So I've got here the duplicolor Perfect Match Clear. This paint has been drying for about half an hour. It's time to go on to this. As usual, you need to shake it well before use. There's no mixing ball in the clear, so don't expect to hear it. Just give it a good shake for about a minute or so before you go to spray. It should also be noted, like I said, this stuff is very bad for you. I've been wearing a mask. You should definitely wear gloves as well. It's not good for your hands. And particularly if you're spraying red, you get some on your fingers, and if you pick your nose, you'll think you're bleeding or something. So wear gloves too. And basically anything you can do to protect yourself, you won't regret it. So once again, I'm gonna mask up. You're gonna see me do the exact same thing. I'm gonna overlap my strokes by 50%. The difference being with the clear coat, I will be applying 3 coats. Again, you're gonna watch the first one. There's no point in you seeing me do the exact same thing 3 times. So you'll watch the first one and then I'll do the other 2, and we'll be back to kind of discuss the final steps on that. And that's that. 3 coats of clear. You can actually get a pretty passable buildup of clear with this can, so it's not a bad product, that's for sure. And it's a pretty small can. You'll notice hopefully you'll notice I only used 1 can of each of those products. I've still got some left, so you don't need to go out and buy a whole ton of it. And despite what I said with how I did a poor job of sanding it and everything, you can see you still end up with a pretty decent clear coat out of the deal. I'm trying to get you a good look here. There's obviously some orange peel because it's a can clear coat, and there were some problems underneath, which I showed you earlier. And you can still, if I get the angle right, you can still see those patterns I was talking about just barely. There we go. Maybe you can kind of catch a look at the ridges there. So that is from the masking that I did on a previous paint job that I didn't sand out properly. Now, with that orange peel, you can get rid of that by doing a proper sand and polish on this. I have demonstrated how to do a sand and polish, how to polish your guitar in several videos, how to polish out clear coat, how to polish your guitar, yada yada. So I'm not going to do it again in this one. If you haven't seen those, feel free to check them out. If you have, I'm sure you're kind of worried that I'm going to waste your time with it again, which I'm not. All in all, looks pretty good. If I'd done a better job at the beginning, it would look even better. Great color, this pearl red, and duplicolor makes a variety of other good colors. It's got a nice metallic to it, which is really hard to see in this crappy fluorescent light. So that's it, guys. I hope you liked the video, or at least found it useful. Now you know how to do a paint job with duplicolor paints. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to post them in the comment section below. And if not, yeah, I hope you liked it. Feel free to give it a thumbs up if you don't mind. And as always, thanks for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.